Alright, so this is another question in this homework 4, question number 14. If the government connects a $1 specific tax, what share of the tax is paid by consumers and firms in each of the following cases? Explain why. And first scenario is, what is the effect of a $1 specific tax connected from producers on equilibrium price and quantity if demand is vertical? So here, depending on the different students, you may have different scenarios. So here it's if demand is vertical, and for other students it may be if demand horizontal. To answer this type of question, who bears a higher burden of the tax? We should first have the basic intuition. It is the side which has a less elastic either supply or demand that will bear a higher burden for the tax. So why that's the intuition? I think it's quite understandable because if you think about it, elasticity measures to some extent the ability of either the consumers or suppliers to change their behavior. So if their behavior is restricted, which means that their elasticity is low, then a tax is likely to increase the price. So the higher price will fall on them more heavily, hence they will bear the burden more. So that's the basic intuition. So before we approach a question, we should have the basic intuition, and then we should look at the details. So demand is vertical. So let me draw a chart so that probably that can help us to better understand. So I only have mouse here, so that's not very beautiful, and pardon me for that. So this is a vertical line is a price, and horizontal line is a quantity. And we have a vertical demand curve, so that's vertical, and this is the demand. So vertical means that the quantity doesn't change. So if the quantity doesn't change, elasticity is the percentage change in quantity divided by the percentage change in price. Hence, since here quantity doesn't change, so the elasticity should be 0. Hence, the consumers actually are very inelastic in terms of their behavior. So in terms of the tax burden, we should immediately have the impression that have the intuition that such inelasticity should make the consumers bear more of the tax burden. So let us verify whether that's the case by using this graph. So that's the demand curve, and for the supply curve, obviously that's the upward sloping supply curve, and that's S1, because later I'm gonna draw a new supply curve after the tax takes effect. And so this is the new supply curve should be parallel to the original one, and their distance should be exactly the tax. And in this case, it's so in terms of the equilibrium point, originally it is the intersection between S1 and D, so that's my E1. And after the tax is levied, the equilibrium moves to this point here. So that's my E2. It's the intersection between the S2 and the D. So compared with E1, E2 obviously has higher price. And by how much higher? Exactly by $1, the tax burden. But the quantity doesn't change. Right, so going back to the question, price increases by $1 and the quantity is unchanged. So who bears the tax burden? Look at the chart. Price increases by $1, but since the tax is levied, going back to the setup, the tax is connected from producers. So tax is connected from producers, and price increased by $1 and tax is $1, and hence the producers actually gets the same as in the past, as before. So producer in this case, they doesn't bear any tax burden. But look at the consumers. The tax is connected from the producers. So now since the price increases by $1, so the consumers, they have to pay a higher price. And by how much higher? By exactly $1, the tax burden. Hence, in this case, consumers, they have to bear 100% of the tax burden. So we fill this blank 100%. So let's check the answer. We're done. So if your case is if demand is horizontal, then that's exactly the opposite. So let's look at that scenario. If the demand is horizontal, so the original demand is horizontal at here, D, and we still have the supply curve upward sloping. This is S1. That's the tax burden. So the original equilibrium is right here, E1. And the new equilibrium is, this is S2. I forgot to label it. S2. Equilibrium is right here, E2. So in this case, actually price doesn't change, but the quantity decreases. Right? So who bears the tax burden? Price doesn't change, so consumers, they don't bear the tax burden. They still pay the same price because the tax is levied from the producers. So what about the producers? They still charge the same price, but at the same time they have to pay the tax. They have to pay the tax to the government. So their profit actually decreases by $1. So in this case, because the horizontal demand curve implies that consumers are perfectly elastic, right? Because in this case, price doesn't change. And remember, elasticity is the percentage change in quantity divided by the percentage change in price. Since price doesn't change, so the denominator is 0. So any number divided by 0 is infinity. So in this case, the consumers, they have the infinite elastic demand curve. Hence, they can change their behavior in a very flexible way. So that's the reason why they don't have to bear the tax burden. So is horizontal, then the price actually is unchanged. The quantity, it should be decreased, and so the incidence of the tax that falls on consumers in this case is 0%. So the second scenario is what is the effect of a $1 specific tax connected from producers on equilibrium price and the quantity if supply is horizontal. So in this case, supply being horizontal means that suppliers, actually they have very elastic behavior, right? So if their behavior is elastic, then we should expect them not to bear the tax burden. So the question asks, so the incidence of the tax that falls on consumers is how much? So if the suppliers, they don't bear the tax burden, so the tax burden has to borne by the consumers. So the supply curve is horizontal. So let me draw the supply curve first. And this is S1. And we should expect the demand curve to be downward sloping. So suppose the demand curve is right here. So after the tax is levied, supply should shift upward, and their distance should be $1, the tax burden. So this is S2, and the distance here is $1. So look at the equilibrium. Original one is right here. So that's the E1. And new one is right here, E2. So compared with E1, E2 has a higher price but lower quantity. And by how much higher price? By exactly $1. But since the price, the tax is levied from producers, so the producers, they charge a higher price, $1 higher, but they have to pay the tax of $1. So their actual net price, net profit doesn't change. But at the same time, consumers, they have to pay a high price. So that's why they bear the exactly 100% tax burden in this case. So the price increases by $1, and the quantity is decreased, and so the incidence of the tax that falls on consumers is again 100%, because supply being horizontal means the suppliers have perfectly elastic behavior, so they don't bear any tax burden in this case. So hence consumers, they have to pay 100% of the tax burden. So if in your case says that if supply is vertical, then that's exactly the opposite. So in this case, we should expect the price to stay the same, right? Vertical. Let me still using the chart to illustrate what we're likely to happen in this case. So Q and P. So if your supply is horizontal, S1, and again demand is downward sloping, and the tax is levied from a supplier, so we should expect we should shift the supply curve upward. But since in this case the supply curve is vertical, so an upward shift of the supply curve actually doesn't change the supply curve. So S1 in this case equals S2. So that also means E1 equals E2. So price and quantity, they don't change. But remember, in this case, the suppliers, they pay taxes. So if the price doesn't change, and at the same time they have to pay taxes, so their net profit decreases by exactly $1. But consumers, they don't pay taxes, so if the price stayed the same, they still pay the same price as before. They don't have to incur any tax burden. So if in your case supply is vertical, then we should fill in the blanks as price is unchanged and quantity is unchanged. So the incidence of the tax that falls on consumers is 0%. Consumers don't bear any tax burden. All right, so that's for this recording.